Hi friends, it's Terry Gaines. In this video, I'm going to share details on how I use the Wonderful World Bundle, which is a stamp set and designer series paper that you get free with a $100 purchase before shipping and tax during Stampin' Up Celebration, which is July and August 2022. In this video, I'm going to show you how I maximized the designer series paper and made many cards, along with how I stamped the stamps to get the best image for these beautiful flowers. So I'm going to start out with the designer series paper. And as I mentioned, the bundle is the stamp set and the designer series paper. The designer series paper is 12 by 12 in size. You get 2 each of 6 double-sided prints. I just have 1 of each here because I utilized the other piece of paper to make some card samples, which I'll be sharing at the end of the video. And also I have a PDF on my blog that you can download that will give you all the cutting dimensions, some photos and details on how I utilize the paper and the stamps. This paper is absolutely beautiful. It coordinates with these Stampin' Up colors, which is available in cardstock, ink pads, blends, embellishments, all kinds of different products. That's what I love about Stampin' Up. It's coordinating product. So on this designer series paper, they're all double-sided, and it's a personal choice which side you choose to use. With all these beautiful flowered images, I'm going to use this side, and I'm not going to be using this side, but it's a personal preference, as I mentioned. And if you were punching or cutting out these flowers, you're going to get 48 flowers plus a few partials on the side that can work for the inside of the card. So I'm going to say I'm going to get 48 flowers times 2 because there's 2 sheets in this packet. This designer series paper is absolutely beautiful, and the beauty of the designer series paper, when it has multiple colors, you get to choose which color you like best that coordinates with it. For this one, this is one side of the paper, this is the other side of the paper. I'm personally going to choose this same side, and I'm going to be sharing more details, but I'm going to use this in a 1.5 inch strip. Now, a couple of the details I'm going to share about the strips of paper the strips I cut this in. Because these floral designs go down in this direction, I'm going to make sure that I cut my paper in that direction versus going across, just to get the stems and some of the flowers. And because it's kind of a medium print, I'm going to cut the strip 1.5 inches wide. And if I go in by 4, I'm going to get 24 sheets, or 24 per sheet. And there's 2, so I'm going to get 48 for this pattern. For this pattern, I also would do the same thing because the design goes down this way. I would cut it in this direction. And also I would put it at least 1.5 inches wide. You could go wider because it is more of a above a medium-sized print. But I'm going to say I'm going to use this side to be 1.5 by 4. And I'll give you more details when I show you the PDF. And this is the other side. This is a smaller print, so I'm going to have my strips at 1 inch by 4. If they're 4 inches, I'm going to get 36. If I went 5.5, then I would be getting 24 per sheet. But we'll talk a little bit more about that. This paper is absolutely beautiful, all 6 designs. This paper has some beautiful flowers on it that you can fussy cut these out, and there's 10 full flowers per sheet, plus you get some side pieces. I'm going to use one of the 2 as the flowers and get 10 flowers per the sheet. And on this one, I'm going to have the strips 1.5 inch wide going down in this direction to get a few rows of this. This paper could be cut this direction or this direction. And when I went this direction in my samples, I went 1 inch wide. So I'm going to just identify this, and I'm going to get 24 per sheet. On this pattern, it's a tough decision whether you go small because it's a small print, or you go larger, wider to get more of the flowers. But I'm going to identify this as being a 1.5 inch wide designer series paper by 4 to get 24 per sheet. When I turn this piece over, I'm going to cut this into strips going across this way. Unfortunately, one of these flowers are upside down, so you have like you can get 2 cards per strip if they're 4 inches wide. So I've identified that I can get 18 strips per this sheet. On this pattern, you can go 1.5 by 4 to get 24 sheets. And on this striped paper, I like a very narrow piece, so I'm going to go 3/4 inch wide by 4 and get 48 per sheet. Now I did all of that because if I cut these in 4-inch strips, I'll get 4 rows per the 12 by 12, and I identified some sheets had flowers. By what I shared on these post-it notes, 4-inch strips, I can get 246 cards using the pack of designer series paper, plus I have 106 flowers that I can embellish those cards with or additional cards with. If my strips were 5.5 instead of 4, that would go down to 170 cards plus the 106 flowers plus some extra pieces. And the extra pieces I'm referencing is when you take a 12 by 12 and cut it at 5.5 and 5.5, you have this 1-inch strip that's definitely available to use for your card making. So that's the plus extra strips. So with that 1 pack of paper, you are going to get so many cards that you can make. So I'm going to share all those details in a PDF, and this PDF is available on my blog. I have, if you are going to cut it 5.5 by 1.5 or 1.5 by 5.5, your first cut, second cut, and then all your third cuts. If you're going to go 4 by 1.5 or 1.5 by 4. And this is all determined, as I mentioned, whether I was cut a horizontal or a portrait version. But I have the 1.5-inch strips, the 1-inch strips, and the 3/4 inch strips. So this is all available along with a few details. The few additional details I want to share about the cards, let me see where I put the, I have a couple more things I wanted to show you. The card base. So if you're going to download this, I want to share with you the cards I'm going to show you after I show you how I stamp. The card bases are 8.5 by 5.5, folded in half or scored at 4.25. You can use a coordinating color or basic white. I have the layer identified as 4 by 5.5. That can be texturized. I use the brick and mortar folder for all my texturizing, and I have that over on the side here. So what I did was I put it in the folder this direction or this direction to get my bricks to be the direction I wanted for the layout of my card. So you just place it in this direction or this direction, and then you can take that and layer that on top of the basic white or your coordinating color. The other way I've done this is I took my card base and I ran it through the folder. Then I used the layer as the inside to stamp. So there's 2 ways to do the layout, but it's the very same dimensions. So I have so much to share in this video, so that's going to give you the details on cutting the strips, and I will show you the cards in a moment. So let's talk about stamping. This stamp set is absolutely beautiful. It has these 3 floral images and then a couple leaf images, and hopefully you can see on the camera all this detail that is in the stamps. Well, we want to retain that detail, so I'm going to share the best way I have found to retain that detail. So I'm going to start out just showing you if I'm going to stamp with 1 color ink. What I want to do on my ink pads is move the ink so I have very little ink. When you stamp, you want the ink just on the surface. If there's too much ink on your ink pad for this style stamp, it's going to go into those crevices and you're not going to see the detail. The best thing to do, that I like to do, is take a plastic spoon. Don't use anything sharp. The plastic spoon has a rounded edge, and I'm just moving the ink away from where I'm going to stamp put the stamp on the ink pad. I'm just moving it. It's eventually going to go back in that location, but then what I can do is just go and I'm just tapping. I'm not pushing, and I just want the ink on the surface. Maybe you can see in the camera how that is just on the surface. Then I'm going to stamp on my paper. I'm going to hold good pressure and just give it some time to absorb into the paper. And then I'm going to get all that beautiful detail that's in the stamp. If there's too much ink, you're going to lose that detail. It's best to clean between stamping. The best way I like to clean, we have other options, but is to use a simple chamois. I cut mine in half and then cut that half section into quarters. They eventually get all stained up like this, but you want to run it under the faucet and then wring out the water, and then all you're going to do is just clean it off by tapping down on that, and you will have your stamp cleaned. Well, this is the way you're going to get all one color. If you want multiple colors, it's best to use the sponge daubers. You're going to get the best coverage on these detailed stamps with the sponge dauber. So I'm going to use Fleur de Flamingo and the Pear Pizzazz as the two colors. So I have a sponge dauber designated for both, and I'm going to use this floral stamp to give you the example. I'm going to start out by just tapping my ink into my ink pad and then tapping it onto the stamped image. You just want to tap it on. I'm going to go with the floral color first, and then I'm going to add the green. The reason I go that direction is if I bring the green a little bit into the flower, that's okay. Sometimes you have that variation on your flower versus getting the color down on the stem. So now when I've got that tapped, it's starting to dry unevenly, so I'm going to huff on it, put some warm air on it, just to reactivate all those ink pigments. I'm going to stamp, hold some pressure down, and I have a lighter color here, but I have the multiple colors. So that's a way to get the two colors and still get the detail of the flower. And again, clean your stamp in between those steps. So let me show you some card samples that I have using the designer series paper and the stamp set that is in this bundle. And before I show you the samples, I want to share two more products that I've used. I've stamped on basic white. I've used the rectangle square dies, some of these and this one, along with the stylish shaped dies for these cards. Also, I've used the brick and mortar folder, which I've already shared with you. So let me move this out of the way and show you some of those beautiful cards. And the designer series paper and the stamp set just brings so much beauty into the product. So here are the ones that I've used, the 1.5 inch strip. Here's a sample where I use basic white in the background, and here I use Pear Pizzazz. This one's using that designer series paper cut out with a rectangle die. This one is that stamped version I just shared with you. This one is the designer series paper, the stylish shaped dies. And you can see as this is rotated this direction, you're going to get 16 of these and 24 of these depending, by the orientation. And here's one using the just the Pear Pizzazz to color in that image there. I dropped some cards on the floor, so I'm going to pick those up. Here's one of the designer series prints that I shared that you can determine whether you want a 1.5 inch strip. That's what I chose when I cut it in this direction. Both of these are designer series paper. This one I fussy cut. The beauty of fussy cutting and then layering it on basic white, it camouflages any of your imperfections of cutting that out. And then on this one, I chose to have it narrower. When I went this direction, I chose it narrower, and this direction I went a 1/2 inch wider. And this is also cut from that designer series paper, and this one is one of the prints that you can get out of that paper. So here's another print. This one I just chose to go 1 inch strips in both directions. Whether I went portrait or horizontal, I chose a 1 inch strips. And in all three of these, I just kept with the Pear Pizzazz flowers. And I think that works out well. It shows a beautiful card. For these two, I went 1 inch strips, But this one is a tough decision. Sometimes I'd go wider just because you get more flowers in the design. So it's a personal choice. Both of these, I used the sponge daubers to color in the flowers, and I think they turned out very well. Here's an example of the one that I used the strip to just layer with the coordinating color, and this is also designer series paper. There is so much you can do with this, and it's all a personal decision on your color choices, on how wide you put your designer series paper, but you can get many cards out of the one pack of designer series paper. This is a 3/4 inch strip with the striped paper, and just use the square die and a rectangle die to cut out the designer series paper and coordinating cardstock. Here I just stamped the flower in daffodil, and I think it makes a beautiful card. Here's two other ones using the same image from the paper, just one's a circle and one's a rectangle, and the orientation is different. So I hope you found this video useful, and as I mentioned, I have a PDF you can download. If you found me via YouTube, go in the comment section of the video, comment section below the video, and there will be a direct link to my blog post where you can download this 4-page PDF. I have some measurements here along with some photos and a link to this video so you can save the PDF and watch this video again. And then if you're going to have your strips 3/4 inch, 1.5, or 1 inch, just some cutting directions. And on each of these, I do indicate the direction of the design is how I determine whether I cut it this way or this way. As I mentioned, I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. I would love to have you subscribe to my YouTube channel. Click the red box under the video, then select the red bell to be notified when I upload a new video. Take care and happy creating.